boredom. There it is. On February 27th. So on February 27th, I referenced the previous, I'm obviously going to always reference the previous one. So I referenced the previous one, and our other list was December 27th in 2023. You know, this is a watch list we built. When we go back to the other one, there's a few additions and a few subtractions, so on and so forth. But obviously the stocks we like are the stocks we like. And it would take this is unusual what's going on right now, because it would take normally a macro change in the entire investing environment for us to change the stocks we like. Okay, it's like, you know, I like GE, I like Apple, I like Hewlett Packard, yeah, I like SKT. You know, there's things I'm gonna like, Macy's, things like that. AT&T is another one. I'm always gonna like them. So, you know, when they're cheap, I want to buy them. When they're not cheap, we keep them on the watch. You know, that's what a watch list is for. So the watch list is saying these are stocks we're watching. If they get to be a good price, we want to buy them. That's the point of the watch list. Usually, stocks don't come on and off the watch list that often. Mostly, they're going to come on. A stock could be to the point where I give up on them. You know, like Walgreens, let's say. So a stock can get to the point where it's just hopeless, and we don't even want to bother with it anymore. But that, you know, honestly, not often. I mean, if I like a stock, it's usually because there's some value there that I do like. And it's just a question of whether now is a good time to buy it. And it's not just about price, it's about price and whether there's a reasonable catalyst that will help other people realize it's a good stock between now and the next, you know, 6 to 12 months. That's worth putting our money in now. So they're not usually subject to a lot of change, but thanks to Mr. Trump coming into office and his, you know, 500 presidential edicts in a few months, the trading environment has changed, the legal environment changes, the tariff environment changes, the whole concept of corporate profitability changes. In fact, you know, I can't invest in Paramount because he doesn't like them and he's suing them. I never had this before. I've never ever in 20 years of doing this have had to say to myself, and 20 years of doing PhilStockWorld, 20 years before that, been investing, I never had to sit there and say, well, you know, the president doesn't like them, so therefore we should, you know, we got to be careful investing because he could pass an edict tomorrow that makes this company illegal. You know, Trump is pissed at Tim Cook, so I shouldn't buy Apple. What the fuck is that? These are things that you say in a dictatorship, not things you say in a democracy. I mean, it really is insane. Never. Who? Name a stock that you've had to say in your entire life where you've had to say the president of the United States doesn't like them, therefore they're a bad investment because he could come after them. And I'm not talking about, like, you know, what's that frickin' the energy company that got in trouble, Enron. So I'm not talking about Enron where they do something bad and the government's after them. The government's after them because they're criminals. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about companies going about their everyday business and just getting persecuted because the president doesn't like the company, doesn't like what they said, doesn't like what they did, doesn't like their internal company policies. What the hell? Yet this is a realistic this is what we find ourselves in. This is what's happening now in America, not in Russia, not in some crazy dictatorship. This is what's happening in America now. We have to take into consideration how the president feels about how he feels about the companies we invested. Does he like what they're doing? And that wouldn't even be so bad if we could actually count on him feeling the same way 2 days in a row. But you can't. You don't know. In fact, Trump could be slamming the crap out of Tesla shortly because Elon Musk crossed him yesterday and said he doesn't think that the big beautiful bill. Oh, excuse me a second. He doesn't think the big beautiful bill is big beautiful is big or beautiful. So Musk is slamming Trump now for being out of control, in Congress especially. He's not so much going after Trump directly, but he's going after Congress and saying, how could anybody vote for this piece of shit? And obviously that's Trump's bill. So Trump has been pushing everyone to vote for it. Now Musk is coming out saying this bill is a betrayal to the American people, which it is. But you know, we didn't think Elon Musk was going to say it all of a sudden. But anyway, so now what happens to Tesla? What happens to their stock? Is Trump going to go after them? Is he going to, you know, tariff them or whatever? He, you know, oh, it's just insane. Anyway, don't want to get too much on that, but what I'm saying is these drastic changes in policy, what the cost of steel, the cost of imports, the banning of certain chips, so on and so forth, all this stuff is radical, but it's being applied place after place after place. And you have to think of all this stuff when you're talking about what to bet on. And frankly, I had a whole discussion with Bodhi about this, and also Anya. We a few of the AIs we had to have a conversation, because it's the same thing I'm telling you. It's not something they would usually think of. It's not something anybody has ever had to think of in history. Therefore, it's not something that's built into their programming. It's not something that's been taught to them. It's not something they've read about in books. This is an entirely new concept of investing that has never had to be thought about, and therefore an AI, and this is a problem, by the way, with all these companies that are relying on AI. The AIs look at, you know, hundreds of years of history and investing trends and this and that and whatever, but nobody's ever done this before. What Trump is doing is new. And it's a radical departure from the way we do business. You really have to study books about investing under Putin. You have to understand strategically investing in China, and say what do you do when government policy dictates your investments? But even that, the problem is it's inconsistent government policy. It's not even following a logical format. Because with China, you'd say, well, China says we want to grow this and that, we want this and that to prosper, and if you invest along with the government with what they say, you're going to do pretty well, because the government says something and they mean it and they stick to it. That ain't happening here. So we have a whole different set of minefields right now. Anyway, so back in February, when the market was here, 5957 on February 27th, right? So we had just fallen below the 6,000 line. And that was the top of our range, although it floated up there, but the top of our range was 6,000. We had predicted, here's the bottom of our range is 5,000. We had been watching the same range all of 2023. This was the same chart. And we broke it a little bit above it, but not so much that we were bothered by it. And why is that? So the 5% rule said that we based out at 5,000. And this is going back on multi-year charts. So so 5,000 was our baseline basically, and we didn't expect to fall below 5,000. That's a 20% correction. We weren't really planning on it going lower than 20%. So that was our worst case pullback scenario. But when we went over, if you've got 1,000-point move up, right, which is 20% of 5,000 is 1,000-point move up. That means each one of these boxes, each one of these lines is 200 points. Very simple. 8, 6, 4, 2, 0. And that means that what we call an overshoot would be one segment, would be an overshoot. So 20% of the run, all runs are going to be 100%, right? So it's a 100% run. It breaks up into 5 segments. Those 5 segments in this case, since it's 1,000 points, but it doesn't matter what the run is, the concept is the same. But you break the run up into 5 segments, and each one is 20% of the total. In this case, it works out extremely neatly because it's a 1,000-point run, and each 20% is 200 points. But over and above that, we do allow for 20% overshoot, and 20%, if it went past 20%, we would have to question our entire premise of what the top is, because the top 6,000 being an overshoot doesn't mean the top wasn't 6,000. It just meant we overshot the top. And the 5% rule allows for that, and it allows for a one segment overshoot. If it goes past 6,200, then you're probably wrong about the entire range, and you have to rethink it. And what would I do if it shot past 6,200? I would say, in this case, I would say, well, look, we had this consolidation here at 54, sorry, and maybe we have to, at this point, redefine the range and bring the bottom up and say that this is stronger than we thought. And then we would have to look at how it looked with the 200-day moving average and the 50-day moving average and so on and so forth. It could have happened. Frankly, it might have happened had Trump not stepped in and screwed everything up. The premise in this time in September and October into December was that corporate profits would be up 15% this year, and if that were true, and if those came in as expected, then there would be reason to say we should be adjusting this thing higher. How much higher? 15% higher takes you to what's 15% of 5,000? 500 plus 250 is 750. So at least 5750 would be 15% higher just based on the so the weak bounce line would become at least the baseline, and then you'd have to sit there and determine whether it should be 54. Now the way it held up here, notice it did go down, but it only went down one segment, right? So it held and fell one segment, so we could actually say, oh, that's an undershoot maybe, and then go back to here. So if we had the overshoot, and we would say maybe that's an undershoot and whatever, but the bottom line is we didn't have that. It did what we expected. It didn't make it it didn't make it one segment above 6,000. We fell back down, and so here on the 27th of February, we're discussing the market and what we would want to buy. So I said for a watch list, we look at blue chip companies, low debt, low PE, reasonable growth. I'm including legacy prices in the description, so we'll know what price we started watching them. All right, so there. So then this is what we did. This was our original pick, the original time we had it, and not the original wording, just the original. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it is. This is our original pick and our original wording. I apologize, that's what that is. So now don't forget, this is a watch list. It's not a buy list. So we didn't lose money. We were just watching ARCB. We never entered it into a portfolio. But back when we first started watching it, it was at 111. So I imagine sometime around this drop, we started watching it. And I said, it's currently demonstrating value, forward P of 13, blah, blah, blah. Logistics and transportation solution shows how significant growth, trading well below the average, blah, 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 blah. But then that was in November, apparently. And then the update is that it was at 80.28 when we did this update in February, whatever. The stock declined significantly. It's more attractive. Q4 earnings showed a revenue of 109 billion, which was down, but operating income improved. Their asset-light strategy pays dividends. The broader transportation sector, the P now 9.1. Blah, blah, blah. It represents an even better value. The 28% drop from our November price creates attractive entry point. So we liked it at 80, and now, frankly, I kind of like it down here. Now I really like it because it's the freaking 60 is ridiculous, I think, but we got to go check it out. So anyway. So that just gives you an idea of what was in here. We had the original pick, and then where it ended up since that pick, and again, we didn't actually buy these ANF, APD. We weren't jumping on things at the time because we were expecting a big correction. But when we got the correction, we said, oh, we're going to want to go in and buy these things. So that's what the watch list. It always is. It's always in progress and looking at it. But the idea is, and you notice the chart is updated even though it's February. These watch list charts update every single day. And so they are dynamic and not static. And that lets us take a look at them and at any given time, and you can browse through the watch list and say, well, who's on sale? Who's on sale? When did we like them? And what did we say about them at the time? Now, when I do a watch list update though, so stocks for the second half of 2025, we're basically in the same place where we were in February 27th. So we were here and now we're here. So the S&P's in the same place, but the question is what happened to the stocks? And the stocks went through this whole, the exact 20% correct, well, not exact, but the exact 20% correction we expected. Notice the overshoot is how much? One segment, right? 4,800 would have been one segment. So it's the same thing going down as it is going up. We had an overshoot here, we have an undershoot here, but it's the same bar, it's the same range that we thought it was going to be. We made our depth cross here. We're recovered through the depth cross. Now we're over the 200-day moving average. It all looks good, but the volume here is not constructive enough for me to be confident in where we are now. So we'll have to see what happens. It's not time to jump right back in. And again, remember, we rode this out and we cashed in our short-term portfolio here. We didn't cash it all in, but we changed it. We cashed in a lot of money. We took it off the table. So our short-term portfolio had these ridiculous gains. I think it was $2.5 million or something. I think we went from 200,000 to 2.5 million basically on the short-term portfolio. So we took the frickin' money off the table. It's like at this point we had $3.5 million worth of protection, and we were able to take $1.2 million off the table down here. We didn't even lose much money here because we sold a lot of short calls on the short-term positions, on the SGP positions, and we just had a fabulous run. I mean, this is the kind of run that if you had this run over 3 or 4 years, you'd be thrilled. The market went down 20% and it went up 20%, and we called it right both times. We got, we called a big short here, and then it went down 20%, and then we got long and it went up 20%. And our long-term portfolio, so right here on May 15th, we said, fuck it, let's get the hell out of this mess. Because you're not going to do that much better. You know what it's like? It's like putting your money on a roulette wheel, right? And let's say you put $5 on 29, and it comes up, and you get paid 30 to 1, whatever it is. You get paid 150 bucks. 150 bucks is nice, right? It's great, but it's only 150 bucks. I know it's 35 to 1, but math is easier. So you go from 5 to 150. And then you say, okay, fine, do it again. Let's do it again. What the hell? And now 29 comes up again, and you get 30 times 150, which is, I don't even know, it's 4,500, is that right? So it's like 4,000. So now you have $4,500 from your $5 bet because you called it right twice in a row. You called a 36 to 1 shot correctly twice in a row. And it's not much brain power in it. You left the money on the table and it hit twice. So now you got $4,500. Do you leave it the third time? Of course, it would be great if you did and it hit. That would be amazing because then you'd have some insane amount of money. I don't know. Let's see. What's 35 times $4,500? You'd have $157,000. Boy, would that be a great story. I put it on 29 and it hit 3 times in a row, and you say that, and I guarantee you most people are like, oh my God, you're amazing, that's fantastic, you're a genius, blah, 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 blah. I would be the guy sitting there going, you're an idiot. I don't care that it worked out. It's like you just freaking risked $4,500 to make 157,000 on a 35 to 1 shot. You had frick, what is it? It's you had a 97% chance of losing your $4,500 gain. 97% chance. And again, it doesn't matter that you left it on 29. You could have moved it to 36, or you could have moved it to 12 or 12. It doesn't matter. The chance of winning 3 times in a row is ridiculous. The chance of winning twice in a row is ridiculous. And it resets. This is a gambler's fallacy. It resets. The odds are the same every time you put the money on the table. It's a 35-to-1 shot. When you put it down the first time, it's a 35-to-1 shot. When you put it down the second time, even if you just won, it doesn't change the odds. It's still 35-to-1 the next time. So in other words, if you flip heads in a coin 10 times in a row, it's amazing that you flip heads 10 times in a row. But the reality is every single time you flip, it's a 50-50 chance that you're going to get heads every time. Doesn't matter how many times you previously had heads, it's still 50-50. And what they call a gambler's fallacy is after you've flipped heads 5 times, right? There are people who think it's like 100-to-1 that you're going to do it again. And if somebody is willing to bet you at that point that you won't flip heads, and they say, I'll give you 10-to-1 odds that you won't flip heads, and they think that's a great bet because what are the chances you can flip heads again? You take it because it's a 50-50 chance you're going to flip heads. But this is not a 50-50 chance. The roulette's not a 50-50 chance. The chances are 97% that you are not going to do it. You are not going to pick the right number on the roulette wheel, 97 out of 100 times. You are not going to get it right. So to get it right twice in a row, incredibly coincidental, but not unheard of. The point is, though, that you are risking much more money. You started out with a $5 bet. You can afford to lose the $5. You win $4,500, right? Because if I do this right, let me get the right number. I'll tell you the right number. So it's $5 times pays 35-to-1, right? So you pay 35-to-1, you got 175. So you're an ordinary human person. You bet $5, that's no big deal. You can lose $5. If you can't lose $5, what are you sitting there playing roulette in Vegas for? So, you can lose $5. Can you lose once? Now you got 175. 175 is already a nice dinner. And depending on who you are, like for me, that's one sushi, that's, a sushi dinner basically for me. It's like it's a sushi dinner at a nice place. So that's right. So it's either a nice steak or a nice sushi for me. It is not enough for me and somebody else to have a nice steak and a nice sushi. It's enough for one of us. It pays for my meal. So I might be inclined to say, oh, you know what? What am I going to lose if I lose? And this is exactly my attitude when I gamble, by the way, in Vegas. I'm like, if I lose, I'll go to McDonald's. If I don't lose, I'll go to the steakhouse. That's my attitude when I play. I'm like playing for tangible things. So if I'm, I'll allocate myself, and $200 is frankly how much I do allocate for gambling. And that is my attitude going in. So I'm like, okay, I'll gamble a bit this afternoon. And if I do well, I go to a nice place for dinner. If I don't do well, I go to a crappy place for dinner. Because frankly, it doesn't cost me anything to lose that way. Because I was going to go to dinner anyway, and I'd be inclined to go to a nice dinner. If I didn't gamble, I'd go to a nice dinner. So I basically punish myself for losing, for being an idiot for gambling. But anyway, so I win 175. I'm like, oh, that's great. Do I let it ride? What the hell? Right? Because what am I going to lose? I'm either going to go to the steakhouse or I'm going to go to McDonald's or get a pizza or whatever. So I'm gambling my nice dinner for the day. I put that, so I leave that on the table. But then I get $4,500. $4,500 is my whole trip. That's my whole trip. The hotels, the food, the airfare, everything is now covered on that bet. Now I'm going to put that on the table. Instead of giving it to my daughter, who would be freaking thrilled. It's 3 months for my daughter. It's 3 months rent. So would my advice be to my daughter to put her 3 months rent on the table and then hope that a random number comes up? It's a 1 in 35 shot, or not even 35. There's a 0 and a double 0, so it's 1 in 37 shot. And no, that's stupid. And that's the point. The point is that you have to reassess the risk you're taking each time. So back on February, whatever, our long-term and short-term portfolios were, I mean, let's just say, for example, they were combined like $4 million combined, right? Then going through this, where we had the huge gain in the short-term portfolio, and then the long-term portfolio recovered, we were over $6 million. We made 50% more money in a couple of months. All right, it's enough of you. All right, so we made 50% more money in a couple of months. Now, on May 15th, I'm saying, wow, because for one thing, when the short-term portfolio went like this, we just happened to nail it. We kept oh God, we kept increasing our hedges as we had these gyrations. We increased our hedges because we were so sure this was the top, and it was going on for a long time since the election. So we were so sure this was the top, and that Trump's policies were going to destroy the universe, that we kept ratcheting up our hedges. And then we had, like I said, $3.5 million worth of hedges, and we cashed them in. We had the 20%. We had the exact 20% drop that we expected in our worst case scenario for our hedges. So they paid off almost perfectly. Meanwhile, our long-term portfolio lost quite a bit of money. It went down probably, I think we lost about $1 million out of I think out of 3 million in the long-term portfolio, I think it dropped to $4 million. It went from like 3 to 2, but still combined, we maintained. We still had our $4 million plus combined, because the short-term portfolio made $1 million and the long-term portfolio lost $1 million, or whatever it worked out to. And more or less, we were even, or we were actually better than even on the drop. Then we took away most of our hedges, because we said, well, this is the 20% we expected, so now we should be at least bouncing. And we did a weak bounce, and then we did a strong bounce, and then we came back to the weak bounce, and then we kept going. So there's nothing here that we didn't expect, hitting our lines almost exactly from the 5% rule. And then we started taking off, and unbelievably, we went all the way back here, which we did not ever expect. This was completely unexpected. Didn't think that was going to happen. Still think it's stupid. So now here we are with the most money we've had in this cycle, $6 million or whatever it was in the long and short-term portfolio. And I have to say, okay, so now what do we do? Do we go back to having $3 million worth of hedges? Well, for one thing, I don't think the market's going to fall 20% this time. Having recovered so nicely, I think it's going to be a lot harder for people to sell off the way they did in this situation. We already know about everything Trump's doing. We know about the tariffs. We know about all the silly stuff he's doing. People are adapting the sectors. The tech industry seems to be thriving. They are making more and more and more money. AI is out of control. And I don't mean like the robots are out of control, but I mean the AI is just growing and growing and growing. And I think there's no stopping. It's like the internet, except, you know what the difference is? The internet allowed any stupid company like pets.com to say, we're pets.com, and therefore because we have .com, we must be huge. And Ryvan, and you know, people who had not Ryvan, that's the car guys, Webvan or whatever they were called, the ones who did the groceries, and the grocery people and whatever. So all these companies just said, oh, we're .comming it and it's going to work, blah blah blah. There's a lot of shit. This isn't like that. This is like, there's only certain multi-billion-dollar companies that really have AI and are actually using it and doing things with it, and they're showing tangible results. They're showing money coming in, money growing, incredible profits, so on and so forth. So it's not like every Tom, Dick, and Harry gets to claim to be an AI company. And you can invest in ones that actually prove it with revenues. Not everything is speculative like it was in the dot-com boom. So there is a core of very successful companies. The problem is that as these very successful companies keep succeeding, they're going to monopolize everything. Because how are you going to compete? So in other words, McDonald's, for example, who already, as you know, have no people anymore in the front, will soon have no people in the back either. Why would they? They'll have a guy in the back watching the robots and a person in the front watching the robots, and they'll have a bunch of robots doing the work. and they will make phenomenal amounts of money. And because McDonald's can afford to spend billions and billions of dollars on rolling out the technology across all their stores, they will be able to outcompete most other chains. They will offer better, faster, cheaper. And not only that, but because McDonald's is able to automate everything they're doing, they could easily say, well, currently we have a human line. Excuse me. Oh man. So we need a robot host here. So McDonald's is going to say, currently we have a human line. We have 6 or 8 people in the back of the house doing the cooking. We have our tellers are gone already. We have the order taking person up front, whatever. But all this gets replaced with robots and AIs. And then they say, well, you know what? The funny thing is, though, a robot, instead of having 3 people needing 9 feet of counter space to work at on each side of the counter, we have 2 robots who need 4 feet of counter space each, and they can do all the work of those 6 people. So you had 18 feet of counter space used up by 6 people. Now you have 2 robots using 8 feet of counter space. There's 10 extra feet of counter space. What can they do with that 10 extra feet of counter space? Well, McDonald's then says to themselves, well, geez, if we add some tortillas, we have everything we need to be Taco Bell. Or if we add a frying station for the chicken, we can then become Popeyes or whatever. It's like we can now serve that. So all of a sudden, McDonald's says, you know, we already have the restaurant, we already have the oils and the frying and the this and the that. And they say, what else could we be? We don't have to be McDonald's only anymore. We can serve multiple things. Like if you ever go to a rest stop on the highway, and Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips and Nathan's are, you know, they usually are like the same place. Nathan's is hot dogs and French fries, and Arthur Treacher's is fish and chips. And they're like, well, we both like chips, and we, you know, chips is like half of both of our business, and hot dogs are easy to cook on a small space, and we have buns and we have fish on the other side. That's what they, you know. So there's a lot of restaurants are going to do that because they're going to say, what do we have in common? What can we do together? And for McDonald's, they're so big, so powerful, so rich that they can afford to say, hey, they can even go to their merchants. They can even say to their franchisors and say, hey, these are the different modules you can install in the McDonald's. You can install the fried chicken module, the fish and chips module. You can install the Mexican module. You can install the pasta module, right? You can install the pizza oven and have a pizza bot. It can all go in the same square footage of a store that used to be only for hamburgers, or you know what I mean. Not obviously only hamburgers, but it used to be a McDonald's, and now it's got all this other stuff. Well, look at their coffee thing, right? They already have the McCafe, and they'll be able to have barista bots that make them basically a Starbucks. Like, what's the purpose of a Starbucks if McDonald's can give you the exact same coffee? And of course, not, you say, oh no, it's not the same. Well, it would be the same if McDonald's went to the same suppliers and made them the same offer and got the same coffee and did the same stuff. And believe me, they can do the same stuff. If Starbucks can teach a barista whose name is Ned, who came off, who used to work at a bookstore and now he's a barista because somebody spent a week training him, that really is not that proprietary. Yes. Believe me, I could teach any of my bots to make a coffee for you. So that's the thing, though. That's what's going to happen, is there's going to be a massive dislocation of all businesses, and again, this is the thing we have to watch out for on the macro environment. It'll be to the tremendous benefit of some, but to the detriment of so many others. And you're talking about a huge wipeout of most businesses. But that's, that's capitalism. That's the inevitability of capitalism. The only way it's going to not happen is if the people say, oh no, I'd rather buy it from humans. If people say I refuse to buy from these conglomerates, I refuse to allow everyone I know to lose their jobs so that AIs can take over. And again, I'm the least anti-AI person in the world, but the reality is they're going to take over. And that would not be a bad thing, except for our attitude about capitalism and distribution of wealth. Okay, because 100 years ago, 90% of the people in America worked. Okay, and most of them worked on farms. And when you're on a farm, I mean when you're in the 1900s farm, when you're on a farm, the grandmother, everyone lived there. The whole family, every generation of the family that was alive lived on the same farm and stayed there their whole lives. And the grandmother would be the grandfather would be like fixing things in the shed and keeping things running and working on equipment or whatever. The son would be out in the field doing the hard work and plowing and whatever the hell he had to do. Yeah, I'd make a great farmer. And the grandmother sitting there sewing clothes for everybody and making stuff, and the kids are waking up in the morning and feeding the chickens and going out and milking the cows and doing whatever. It's like anybody who was able to move did something to contribute to the labor. So that's what I mean by employed. Everybody did something, everybody worked, everybody's hands were somewhere. Children were working in factories back then. I mean, child labor was a major thing, and nobody thought twice about it at the time. It's like, hey, the kid can work, the kid can walk to school, he can walk home to a factory job and put a few hours in. And it wasn't like there was anything on TV anyway. So fast forward now, 100 years later, 2025, whatever year this is. So fast forward to 2025, and only half the people in the country work. And why? Industrial revolution, automation, so on and so forth, to the point where we pass laws saying children shouldn't work. People under 16 shouldn't really work, basically. And then we have a retirement thing. Then we also have this. So we say under 16 doesn't have to work. Over 65 doesn't have to work anymore. Those are the times you get to have fun. The middle of your life, when you're in your prime, that's when you have to waste it in an office. Those are our rules. So that's fine. And at first, obviously with some disruptions, there were union fights, there was union busting, there were labor laws, there were this and that, blah, 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 all these things. But obviously with some of the adaptations, we got into the system where a husband could go to work, come home to a nice house in the suburbs, and had put his kids to college and buy a car for himself and his wife and buy his kids their first car, and they had room with a big garage and the house and all that crap, and they had happy lives. We had that for a while. But that was a distribution of wealth. A certain proportion of the wealth, of the earnings of the companies, of the money that was made in America went to the working men and was enough money for them to live their lives. And not to be sexist with women, but I mean, this was a reality. It was mostly men, supporting families. So this is the Mad Men era, basically, in the 50s and 60s and whatever. So post World War II, people came home, got really good jobs, and were able to support their families, and that lasted all the way until like the 80s. And also, by the way, that was also aided by the fact that you would buy a house for $500 and you would sell it for $4,000, and that was a lot of money, and you would have a huge profit on your house, and you could retire based on what you made on the home you invested in when you were young, when you first got married. So the thing is that was the way wealth worked. I mean wealth. I mean just normal person's income wealth. So that has eroded since Reagan, basically. That has really eroded drastically, and now the people who work for a living can barely get by. The husband works, the wife works, the children work as soon as they're able, and all of them together can barely make enough money to survive in a suburban home. And then college costs are now as much as the home. So now if you have 3 kids, you have 4 mortgages. You have your house mortgage and 3 college mortgages to try to get them to college, which gives you the parent no actual return on investment, because you have just basically paid for 3 kids' college. That was your entire retirement, has been spent putting your kids to school in the hopes that they are able to go out and support themselves and their kids and so on and so forth. It's never coming back, other than if you move in with them and live with them and become a burden on them in the future. That's the only way it really comes back. And again, you got to, think about, it's obviously a simplification, but you have to think of it in the terms of working people who don't have their retirement set up, who don't have a lot of savings, who live almost paycheck to paycheck in the suburbs and are forced to borrow $1 million to put 3 kids to college. And that's not even counting tutors and so on and so forth to get them through school in the first place to get to that point. Or supporting the kids after college. That's another thing people don't talk about. I was fortunate because Jackie went to Hoboken. She went to Stevens Institute in Hoboken, and while she was there, she found a place, it's really a 4-bedroom place with a 5th bedroom that they made out of the back of the kitchen, like what I guess. It's not really a mudroom. It was yeah, it was. It was used as a laundry room, sort of mudroom, and it had it led to the outside. That really was a room that led to the outside. They had a little backyard, and lovely townhouse right off the main streets. And so 5 girls lived in there. It was $5,500 a month. So they paid $1,100 each. So $5,500 a month, a lot of money for a college dorm, but it was great because she had 5 roommates. They all loved each other. They had a wonderful time. Everything was great. She stayed there after she went to college. They were like, why? 3 of the 5 kids were like, why are we going to give this up? So the 3 of the 5 that still lived there, that still had city jobs, kept it. It was an easy commute. And so that's where Jackie's been since then. She's still there for really cheap rent. That's not true for everybody, though. A lot of people have to support their kids. If Jackie had been, if we had lived in Pennsylvania or something like that, and lived in a house there, and Jackie went to college, she went to Wharton or she went to UP, and if she had done that and then she got a job in New York City, it wouldn't be like that. She wouldn't be. I wouldn't let her live in a $1,100 a month anything in New York City. I don't care how many people are shoved into it. So she would need assistance, right? This happens to very many parents after college. It's not done just because your kids are out of college, and of course, medical costs and things like that. So it's not done when your kids are out of college. You're still supporting them for a while after college. So it's a good $500,000 per kid just to go through the education cycle at the end of when they're staying with you. And I think basically they do say it's about $1 million per kid now to raise a kid from baby to college. And there's your retirement. There goes your planned retirement for most people. They don't make that much money in their lives that they can afford this. So in what should be like a great time of their lives, when you're maximizing your earnings at work and all that, it's all going out the window. If you're hearing this, I love you guys anyway. So Maddie and Jackie, I love you anyway. It doesn't matter. But the thing is that that's what we're accepting now. So we've already gone down the path of going from one man's salary can support an entire family, put the kids to college, and retire on what he saves still after that. We went from that to now everybody in the family works, and God help you if you don't manage to scrape up together enough for retirement. Now, what happens next when we go from 50% of the people working, 1 person per family is what we mean when we say half the people work. One person per family works. There's 165 million people with jobs. There's 165 million people who don't have jobs in this country. That's it. That accounts for 330 million people. So what happens when there are going to be robots that do half the jobs? and again, you know, the basic math of this is, think of a sophisticated robot, right? Because you already can talk to an AI, you already understand how sophisticated an AI is. So now give it a body, right? So you think of a sophisticated robot, and let's say it cost $50,000 to make. Elon Musk says 20, but he's full of shit anyway. But Elon Musk says 20. They're already making them in Japan and China for 30 about. So I'm talking about a more sophisticated robot that can do pretty much everything a human can do. Has the finger strength and the arm, you know, arms, legs, stands up, whatever, can go places. 50,000 should easily cover it. Okay, that's only a year's salary for a person, except the robot will work 24 hours a day. So already, as an employer, I'm like, okay, so I get the robot, and the robot works 24 hours a day, is smarter than most people, and it should last at least 3 years, probably longer, but let's say even just 3 years, and I have to get a new one. Or more intelligently, they should only be available for lease. You know, if the companies who do the robots are smart, they should only lease them and always maintain ownership so that they can always upgrade and upcycle, and that, you know, robots don't run down and fall down the street. You don't want that if you're a robot seller. You want to make sure all the robots are always good new models and whatever. So you should roll over leases like they do with cars. But either way, so meanwhile, every robot I buy for $50,000 replaces 3 workers, not 1 worker. So if he can do the filing, and I have 5 people doing filing, I just buy 2 robots, and I get rid of 5 people. Even if I paid him $25,000 a year, I'm taking a $100,000 robot, replacing $125,000 in salaries. But those 2 robots can do even more work than those 5 people were doing, and plus, they'll do it for 2 more years for free after I've already justified the cost. So, you know, when people question how fast a robot's gonna take over in society, that's how fast, as I can freaking afford to get one. As an employer, I'm like, yes, how can I get one of these robots now? It can do every job at McDonald's. So my entire cost basis of owning McDonald's changes drastically, right? And what happens? The rich get richer. I'm a McDonald's franchiser. I will become much richer because I don't need all these frickin' people. And so, of course, money will, instead of money flowing from the employers to the employees, money will flow from the employers to the robot companies who are already obviously rich, to IBM, to Tesla, to whoever. So money will go from the wealthy franchisees to the wealthy factory owners who make robots, and the people will be told to go home. But do come back and buy the hamburgers, of course. Don't forget to come back and buy the food that you no longer make. So massive disruption. All of this would be fine if we revisit the way we distribute the wealth. Somebody would have to say, hey, wait a minute, you've got this robot and it's doing all the work and you're making more money and the robot maker is making more money. So we need to make a special tax that takes that money that you're all making and redistributes that to the workers. And of course, even as I say that, to most of you say, well, that doesn't sound right. Why should they get the money? They're not even working anymore. It's not their fault. It's not necessary for them to work. There's no point to them working. So the fight should not be, we want to work. Doing what? There's no need for you to work. The robots can do all of it, and those robots will make all the same amount of hamburgers are going to get made. More hamburgers. It'll be more efficient. The same hamburgers will get made, and the slaughterhouse is going to be full of robots too. So they'll get made more. They'll get made better and cheaper than they were before. The ingredients will start getting cheaper. Labor will become a non-cost, which is 1/3 of all costs for companies, basically. So labor suddenly goes away. Where does all this money that was being paid to the laborers go? Well, if you took a good portion of it and you still gave it to the laborers, they would still be able to afford to come in and buy the food and do whatever, right? But they'd also have all this free time in their lives. What would they do with the free time in their lives? Well, if you're Donald Trump, you would say they're going to rape and kill, because that's what people do. If you give them free time, they're going to rape and they're going to kill and they're going to do drugs. In reality, where they've done universal basic income experiments, people find something else that they enjoy doing. They become artists, they become craftsmen. And I mean, you know, all of a sudden, like back in ancient Greece, every door had little, you know, carvings on it and artwork, and there was lots of art in the public squares, and there were beautiful gardens and so on and so forth. Sure, because people had time to do that kind of crap. You know, because Michelangelo had all day to lay on his back and paint the Sistine Chapel for years on time. Yeah, of course the church gave him some money, but you know, the point is people had time to become artists, people had time to be philosophers, people had time to put on plays and so on and so forth, and be musicians. You can go back to that, and there's nothing wrong with that as a society. Support these people. People should have the right not to work because we don't need them to work. But you shouldn't penalize them for them. Yes, you can reward people who work and say, yeah, you get your basic income, what they call universal basic income. You get your basic income, but you also can have a job and have more income. That's entirely up to you. But since we have robots that can provide all the housing that people need and will create electricity for the, you know, for the electric companies, there's a surplus of everything because we have these robots. Why would you then force people to work unnecessarily at jobs? But the problem is, even if you think that's a good idea, how are we going to change society's minds? How are we going to change the whole concept of work and structure and pay and so on and so forth over the next 5 to 10 years before the robots take over? And that's frankly why the oligarchs are stepping in now. This is why they jumped in, because they see this coming. All the people who are going to benefit from this already see this coming, and they already know that the only answer is going to be a redistribution of wealth. And I'm not saying take all their money, but I'm saying take all the extra money they're going to make. And again, it's very, very simple concept, right? McDonald's spends, you know, McDonald's typical operation will have, let's say, 20 people. Maybe 60 people if they have long hours. So, but okay, so let's say a late night McDonald's kind of place will have 60 total staff. They'll have 10, 15 people in at a time. They roll over on they roll shifts and they roll days and so on and so forth. So they got 60 people. Now let's say those 60 people can be replaced by 20 robots. So if you got 60 people. So you got 60 people you were paying $30,000 average to. That's 1.8 million. And if you replace those 60 people with 20 robots that you pay $50,000 for, that's 1 million. So you've already saved $800,000, right? Yeah, 20 robots. So you got 20 robots working 24 hours a day as opposed to people who work 8 hours a day or whatever. So yeah, you saved that much in 1 year. Next year, you're not paying for the robots again. Maybe you're paying a service contract or whatever, but you know, next year you're not paying it. So now you're going to save not just the 800,000 this year, but another $3.6 million in the next 2 years. So switching to robots is making the owner of the McDonald's $4 million richer per year. Not per year, I'm sorry, every 3 years. He's getting $4 million richer. The people who used to work there got $4 million poorer, or I'm sorry, not 4 million. They're not getting $1.8 million times 3 is $5.4 million. So in 3 years, The owner got $4 million richer. The workers got $5.4 million poorer. And you know who else got poorer? The entire community, because the workers used to take the money and go spend it in the community. The owner has the one house on the hill and doesn't have, you know, 60 workers don't have 20 cars. I mean, sorry, 60 workers do have 20 cars. One owner doesn't have 20 cars. Not many people, not every research does that. And so less cars are being sold, less this and that. And meanwhile, the money that he's spending, the money he does spend, the money on the robots for $1 million, that goes not to the community, but it is siphoned off. So the money that's spent by the community at McDonald's does not go back to community jobs and doesn't get recycled in the community. That money gets siphoned away to the Tesla factory who makes the robots. This is a complete and total economic disaster. And this is what we're walking into right now. This is what's happening. So that's just a little bit of the macro environment that we need to be concerned about. It's real, it's happening. But like I'm saying, if we don't really rethink the entire concept of what people should do and what they should earn and how work goes, we're going to just run off the rails. We can't. If we don't adapt, we're not going to survive. And again, that's why the oligarchs took over, because they know this is going to happen. Obviously, they're looking forward to it. Look how rich they're going to get. But what's going to happen to us? And in a democracy, all the us that gets unemployed from this stuff, all the people who are getting railroaded on this thing would pass some laws saying, hey, we have a right to tax you more, and so on and so forth. That's unacceptable. And therefore, these guys have proactively spent billions of dollars to take over the government so that they can make sure that this won't happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't know what's going to happen to the hundreds of millions of people who are going to lose their jobs. I really can't imagine how they think this is going to work. And again, it goes back to the old thing that Ford realized. Ford realized if you don't pay your workers enough, they can't afford to buy your stuff. You know, Ford was selling $500 cars. He started paying his workers $5 an hour so they could afford to buy his cars. That worked great because the money went back into the community. It created prosperity. Everybody wanted cars, and everybody were buying. Well, there weren't any other cars. Everybody bought Ford cars, and that was fantastic. But we don't have a plan for that. We're not looking at that. And so even these people who think they're going to do so great, like the McDonald's owner who sits there and says, I'm going to make an extra $4 million every 5 years, every 3 years. Yeah, but how are you going to make it if nobody can afford to eat at your McDonald's? All of your customers are going to be unemployed. It all sounds great until you think it through. But, you know, as you know, the average oligarch, which is essentially anybody in government right now, the average oligarch doesn't think about anything about the people, the common people. They don't think about them at all. They don't care about them at all. They're in no way, shape, or form concerned with those people's great long-term well-being. They don't see it in the equation, and that hole in what they're seeing is going to lead to everybody's downfall, including ours. Oh, the beige book came out. I wonder how that went. I don't know. We'll look at that in a minute. All right. So that's one economic threat that you should be aware of. We had well, last week Bodie came up with I think it was Bodie. Yeah. So Bodie and I were talking about, you know, what we should be concerned about, and we talked about the escalating trade war. Federal Reserve doing their policy wrong could lead to big problems. Consumer spending is collapsing. The housing market is imploding. People can't afford houses anymore, especially with higher rates. The debt ceiling nonsense, the fiscal crisis, that's obviously ongoing. China's economic deterioration is also an ongoing problem. Geopolitical, the Russia, Ukraine, and things like that is not going away. Corporate earnings are shrinking and margins getting squeezed. You know, the IMF or whoever, or the World Economic Forum, whoever it was, just downgraded the U.S. growth outlook to 1.6%. That's down from 1.9% a week ago. That's awful. And you can't have 1.6% growth while you're adding $3 trillion to your debt, while you're adding like almost 10% to the debt. So your economy is growing at 1.6%, but you're spending 10% of your GDP to get there. How does that make any sense? We're going 10% further into debt to achieve 1.6% growth. China went massively into debt, but they got 10% growth out of it. We're not doing that. You know why? Because we're not spending our money to build things. The government's not taking the money they have and building things with it. They're giving tax breaks to people who are already rich. It doesn't improve the economy at all. That's been proven over and over and over again since the word trickle down was invented, since the phrase trickle down was invented. It's been proven over and over and over again that that does nothing for the economy. Giving money to rich people is the worst use of money. They already have money. They don't need money. Right? You guys understand that, right? If you have money, and I mean money, not like a little money. I mean, when you have money, when you have, look, if you have $10 million, right? Net, if you have $10 million net of debt right now, you could retire and never work again. If you're 40 years old with $10 million and you're going to live another 40 years, okay, you just say, okay, how much will I have then? That would be $250,000 a year. If you just took the $10 million and spent it over 40 years, $250,000 a year that you could spend for 40 years. But that's not how it works. You need $250,000 a year to work. If you put the $10 million in the bank and got 5%, that'd be $500,000 a year. So you wouldn't even touch the principal, and getting 5%, which is what you get on a long-term bond now. If you got 5%, that'd be $500,000 a year. The problem is people with $10 million don't live $500,000 a year lives. That's what the problem is. You get used to the money, you keep ratcheting up your lifestyle, blah, 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 blah. You talk to any normal person in America and say, here's $10 million, you have $500,000 a year to live on. They'd be like, holy shit, my life has changed. Everybody, a normal family, that's ratcheting up their lifestyle by a mile. The average family in America makes $100,000 a year. And you're talking about, oh, I can't live on $250,000, I can't live on $500,000 a year. How could you say that? Just go live a more mellow life. And it's certainly not a bad life. 500,000 a year is not a bad life. But that's the point. So that's what I mean by wealthy. When you talk about wealthy people, I'm talking about people who already have $10 million. They might not think they're wealthy because they can't afford the yacht they want, and they can't afford the home in San Moritz that they want, or they can't afford the third ski house that they want. I used to have 3 ski houses. So I know what I'm talking about. You have to, again, it's a concept of saying what's realistic. How much is enough? And that's what we're talking about, though. When you talk about like redistributing wealth, I'm talking about redistributing wealth that's in excess of what any normal person would need. And so when you take a person who's already rich, who's already got 10 million, and you say, okay, let's say you're a $500,000 a year lawyer or doctor, and you've got $10 million saved up already, and you're going to work for 20 more years, and since you already have all this money and you got the interest income and whatever coming in, you're probably going to end up with 20 or 30 million when you retire. But instead, we're going to tax half of that, and you're only going to get you'll go from 10 million to maybe 15 to 20 million when you retire, because you already have enough. Because there's a concept of enough, and now half your money will go back to taxes and so on and so forth. Is that unfair to the person who's got the money? Somewhat, but look at the good it does when you redistribute it. Look how many people you're going to help. And that's a societal thing. You have to look at it that way. This money needs to be redistributed from people who are fortunate to people who are less fortunate. But the problem is also, though, we have so many less fortunate people. We created that. we created a problem that is now so big that money barely is enough to help. But you got to start somewhere. You got to do something. And mostly it's corporations. It's not so much people, it's corporations who pay virtually no tax. You know, the total tax rate on corporate profits is less than 10% in America. That's a total of all taxes collected off of all corporate earnings is less than 10%. It used to be 60%, now it's 10%. That's where all the money went. And now these corporations are about to become much, much, much richer. Anyway, so corporate earnings recession, AI bubble burst. That's, like I said, not really happening because again, we're replacing 100 million jobs with robots in the next 20 years. Home care workers are going to be robots. Everybody in fast food is millions and millions and millions of people are going to be robots. Farmers are going to be robots. Field workers are going to be robots. There's no economic justification for not being robots. And when the math works that well, and again, I'm talking $50,000 robots, they're really not going to cost that much. But when the math works that well, and like I said, Tesla makes $1 million per business that they sell. So each McDonald's owner makes $4 million more in 3 years. Tesla makes $1 million selling the robot, but there are hundreds of, or well, there's however many thousands of McDonald's locations. So they're making trillions selling the robots, and the owners are making, again, 4 times more than they make. So they're making tens of trillions of dollars. Those capitalists are making tens of trillions of dollars who own the McDonald's, and that's just McDonald's. And then there's also KFC and whatever other thousands of franchises, stores, retail shops, blah, blah, blah. It makes no sense not to have robots. And it makes no sense not to sell the robots to people. And let's say it's a $100,000 robot, then if I was Tesla, I would lease it to people for $33,000 a year. And the math still works for everybody. So that's the future. It's the inevitable future. So that bubble is not going to burst. It's just a question of picking the right place. And then credit market stress, we already see that with the notes and all that. We, you know, as a country, and we talked about that last week, we're just borrowing way, way too much money. All right, so anyway, so that's what we talked about there. Most likely scenario, rolling correction beginning with housing and consumer spending spreading to corporate earnings and potentially culminating in a broader recession by Q4 2025. Ooh, that's soon. Or Q1 2026. The market's current optimism reminds me of 2007. This is Bodie talking, not me. Reminds me of 2007 when everybody believed the Goldilocks economy. Exactly. And I didn't do webinars back then, but I mean, you could look up my articles from 2006, 2007, and I talked about this constantly. I'm like, this cannot go on forever. We are playing for a best case optimized, everything will be perfect for every scenario, and that won't happen. And that's what he's saying here. Because we've been talking, he says, as you correctly note, these issues won't magically disappear. They're more likely to compound and create a kind of perfect storm that catches over-leveraged, overconfident investors completely off guard. And that's what happened in 2008. Despite me pounding the table and screaming and yelling for 2 straight years, still nobody believed me in 2008, and the market completely collapsed. You know, turned out to be great for us. We went shopping, but terrible for people who didn't listen. and right now I'm telling you, you're not listening. The second half of 2005 could be a rude awakening for investors who think this time is different. Smart money should be preparing, blah, blah, blah. So I said, so we're not going to just jump gung-ho into new trades. We added Pinterest as our first trade for the long-term portfolio because we were looking at some stuff when we ran Pinterest and said it's so great. So here's the updated one. Now we gave up that old format because you know, frankly, it's silly to say, oh, here's what we said there, here's what we said there. So this is just basically ARC-B, it was 111 when we started, now it's 64, so it dropped 50% basically. And here's a rundown on them. All right, so then we're saying it stays on the watch list with deep value play with the caution. Only consider adding if there's evidence of sector stabilization or reversal of industrial demand, or if macro deteriorates further, if tariffs remain punitive levels. So, you know, they're very tariff dependent. We have to watch them closely, but this is a great price, and I obviously worth watching. I frankly would be happy to sell some puts here. But here's a note, because we have a new long-term portfolio, new short-term portfolio, we obviously have margin to sell puts, but we don't have the kind of margin we had when we were sitting on $3 million in cash in a long-term portfolio. You have to be careful what you sell puts on. You can't just sell puts randomly on everything. So it's easy to say, sure, I would sell puts on these guys, but not necessarily that this is going to be a good fit for us. All right, but I do think that if we take a look at their earnings when they come up, I think this is going to be a good play. Here's a ANF on the retail side, and again, you can see how they've come back very deeply. A lot of buyers came in here on earnings. They like the report, but again, it's tariffy. You got to look carefully and see how they do on the tariffs. APD. Also, well, APD is basically back. It went away from us and got much higher from where we started, and then it came back down. So now it's back to about where we started. Obviously, we like them. I've always liked their products. In fact, they're in New Jersey, and my stepfather used to work with them, so I know a lot about them. It's a great company. It's a great company because you don't think about it. Okay, when you know, they're they're high-end specialty chemicals like hydrogen, things like that they ship around, and special gases for projects. So it's not a replicable business, especially as they have pollution dispensations for their operations. So it's very hard to start another company that does the same thing in America. And it's just a question of whether or not industry is at the moment, you know, vital for them to work in. But I think this is going to be a very good long-term business here. ARCC, we like them. We'll keep them on the watch list, but they're not that cheap at the moment. Boeing is of course catching back up. In fact, that's really look at Boeing. So we liked them when they were down here. We actually made a play on them in the old portfolios. 213, not as attractive really. Baxter, and starting here, Bodie started doing this instead. He started like categorizing, instead of saying just summary. He started giving them categories. So now he's saying ready to accumulate. And I agree. Yeah, this is the bottom. This is a good solid bottom for them. We start building here. You know, but the trick is, the next question to go through is who has immediate catalysts, and that's when we want to start making our picks. Here's Best Buy, not much cheaper than it was when we started. We like them, but we're still watching it to see how they do. Again, tariffs, you don't know what's what with the tariffs. Barclays, when the when the financials crashed in here, Barclays was the first thing we bought. This was the stock that we jumped on back in 2022 when everything fell apart. Obviously, that did very well, but it didn't. You know, at first we was waiting, but we were like, I want Barclays. And when they went down, we bought a lot more Barclays because we knew we wanted Barclays. So this was the first big bank stock we jumped on when everything crashed, and then it went up more than double, and we got out when it got more than double. We were happy. But now it's still up. So it's still actually a reasonably priced stock, but it's just not as exciting as it was. But, you know, we took advantage of a crisis. We got lucky. BXMT is a REIT, fantastic REIT, pays a huge dividend, great price. Definitely want to put those in a portfolio. Cheesecake Factory, I always love Cheesecake Factory if they're cheap, but they're not cheap at the moment. CalMaine, this price is still very cheap for them. They're up a lot from where they were, but they are ready to But when we started watching them, they were 97, then they were 97 again. But we started watching them way back. No, maybe not way back. I'm sorry. So I guess we started watching them somewhere around here. So it wasn't that long ago we started watching them. And then back to where they were. And the price is reasonable for the growth that they're seeing. I was a little worried about them because I wasn't sure, like, when egg prices calm down, what happens to their margins, so on and so forth. But still, they got the eggs. CIM, I can't believe is $13. That's like a jump on kind of thing. I don't agree with Bodie here. He's saying still watching. I think it's a jump on. And again, it's a huge dividend. It's a huge dividend. It's very easy to sell short puts and calls against and reduce the basis. CLF, disaster. It's 50% down from where it was, but I think this is finally a place where you can say, how much lower could it possibly go? This is so stupid. And especially with Trump is now protecting them with tariffs. This is a protected business now. Comcast is always a good deal, went from 43 to 34, so it's even cheaper. And so this is the point at which we kind of get compelling. We did in fact, before we shut down the portfolios, we did jump in and buy these guys. So going to buy them again. CNH has been flat since we started watching them, and we're still watching them to see how they do, but I like them. Crocs, I love Crocs, not cheap. He says ready to accumulate. Well, okay, they came down, that's why. Okay, so he says ready to accumulate. I can go for 100, really anything under, but in this case, this would be one where I would sell some puts and say, okay, fine, if we end up owning them, that's fine with me. And here's CRISPR. I love CRISPR. I think they're gonna at some point hit something very big. They don't own the patent on this stuff, but they use it very well. So, and they have the right to, and therefore, so it's just a matter of when they catch the right cures and figure out the right things to do. CVS we like. They've gotten a bit more expensive. We like them still though, and especially with Walgreens in chaos, it's good for CVS. And Rite Aid, of course, is dead. Disney from 88 to 113 already, and we still like it. And then that's where we got up to. So then we have many more to do. But that's how we're going to start building our portfolio. Let's see, questions. Oh yeah. All right, Rick's a good CFO to have with you because he says and they can write off the robot as an investment and depreciate it on the taxes. That's right. Unlike employees, well, no, employees, I mean, you're paying them, so you're kind of writing it off also. But yeah, you can write them off and depreciate your robots as well. It's crazy. It's a big win-win. So now let's see how awful the beige book was. Beige book. What happened? Oh, just slow. How are we doing? Oh dear, what happened to Warren? Oh, log in, not even logged in. That's messed up. All right. Like you to compare the previous beige book to the one released today. What has changed? What trends do you see, etc.? Please also take into account the overall economic and market environment. This is not Warren. This is just a straight up chat GPT, blah, blah, blah. But it does tend to draw off everything we've talked about in all the conversations. So should be a little bit smarter than a regular one out of the box. Please take into account the overall economic and market environment. Report. Cool. So beige book, where was it? Beige book. April 23rd. Right. Oh, actually, it'll be fun. Since it's not Warren, let's see if we can abuse him. Oh, what happened? That's not right. Shit. All right, here we go. So let's get back to that page. Okay. This is some real AI abuse. Oh no, what happened there? Frick. Where's the one I was working on? Is anyone paying attention? Oh, these are all chat GPTs. Okay. PDF. Oh no. Plus, add photos and files. Right. Whoop. Oh, okay. That's not how that works. Oh, I got to download them both first. What a pain in the ass. You can't just drop PDF in? No, that didn't work. All right. Save link as. Oh, I could have copied the address. Copy link address. There we go. Copy link address. Add photo, file, whatever. Previous page breaks the one release today. Okay. There we go. See how it's showing its thinking? The shift in economic activity could indicate early signs of a slowdown. I need to consider the broader economic environments, looking for additional factors. Oh, what is this? Oh, that's pretty ugly. I wonder if that's going to get better afterwards. Ew. Why would it be doing this? Do you like this personality? I'm sorry, but I'm having trouble reading your output. It includes, what do you call those things? Formatting codes. Wow, it sucks when I don't use Warren. He's already trained. What is all this shit? Sorry, guys. I didn't think it was going to be such a problem. Look at this. Wow. You see, he does know. That's interesting because he knows we use WordPerfect. I mean, not WordPerfect, WordPress. And they want you to pick one. All right, so Beige Book, National Tone. April 23rd, the Fed described the nation little changed. June declined slightly. Half of the districts now show outright slippage. Okay, so that's bad. Momentum was merely stalling in April and is now slipping into reverse. Labor market, that's bad. Employment was little changed, up slightly with several things. In June, employment is flat. 2 districts with outright declines. Turnover is down. Wage growth is easing. Plateaus are turning into gentle descents with wage pressure has likely peaked for this cycle. So good for companies if wage pressure is peaking, but not good for people. Prices. Price gains were split between modest and moderate. Price growth remains moderate, but contracts now expect costs to rise faster, so inflation's coming back worse. The tariff wave that was still on the horizon in April is about to wash through in summer CPI prints. Sector checkup. Consumer spending. April showed lower non-auto sales, but a rush into big ticket items. June confirms mixed demand with more districts seeing outright declines, and beat the tariff buying still persists. So you know, there's a false positive there. 2/3 of district were flat or down in April. June upgrades to that system to slight decline. June upgrades that into a system-wide decline. Housing and CRE. April's slight pickup in home sales has faded to little change, and construction is flat to slowing. Bank lending, both books call demand mixed, but June notes weaker appetite in several regions. This is very bad declining Beige Book, frankly. How's the indexes taking that? Nope, don't care. Interesting. What's the point of looking at these things? Both surveys flag elevated uncertainty, yet June shows pessimistic camp is growing. More references to delayed CapEx menu reprinting and contingency layoff plans. This is awful. And last month we said it was terrible. So this is more terrible. Because the thing is, when you're looking at it, it's saying we're slipping from April, which was already a very bad slipping from March. ADP shock with 37,000 payroll gains. It was really up to date. The weakest since early 2023, rekindling Fed cut bets. That's good. That means he used the web, because that certainly wasn't in the Beige Book. So he used the web to augment what he was looking at. Treasury yields 4.35 with rate cut odds for September have crossed 60%. So now it's more likely that September will get a cut. Stock manager, bad news is good pop led by defensives. Key takeaway. Deceleration confirmed. 2 consecutive beige books now point to a gentle downslope, not a plateau. Tariff pass-through ahead. Brace for summer inflation bumps, even as growth cools, so stagflation in the summer. Wage pressures fading, supports Phil's call for, see, even when you start a new session, it still knows what we talked about in the past. It's interesting. He still knows I'm Phil. He still knows what we've been talking about. That's really great. You know, that means like all those conversations I had with Warren aren't wasted, even if I use the new chat GPT. So Phil's call for a 25-point base cut once the Fed can point to a softer labor data. Sector positioning favor, ooh, that's English. Favor domestic high margin names, hedge exporters. So look for domestic high margin names, hedge exporters, and tariff exposed cyclicals via call spreads. Watch credit spreads. If lending caution turns into funding stress, the macro narrative soft landing to a hard breaking. Ay. All right, I'm going to say I prefer this one just to get the bigger screen. There we go. So here he's got more of a chart. So National Pulse. Overall activity, little change. 5, see, this is nice. This is better. 5 districts up, 3 flat, 4 down. Here we have 6 down. Look at that. I went from 5 up and 3 flat and 4 down to 6 down, 3 flat, 3 up. That's really bad. He calls that mild. I think that's a very terrible change. Tariff uncertainty, tariff pass-throughs, from angst to action. I like this guy. Employment. Flat to slightly up hiring pause is emerging. You know, first of all, let's keep in mind that all I did was I gave him a little tiny description and downloaded 2 PDFs, and he read them and came up with all this. This is great. But again, this is why everybody's going to get replaced. Okay, I'm freaking great at my job, and he's doing it. I would not be able to really argue too hard that this guy can't replace me. I mean, it's just he could be taught to replace me very easily. There's years of experience and insights and whatever, but honestly, I mean, this is freaking for comparing 2 beige books and coming up with the key points. This is why everybody's going to get replaced by robots. I mean, look how close we are already. It's angst to action. I mean, the thing is that statement really encapsulates what it is, and it shows that he really gets it. You know what I mean? There's like, it's a joke that he decides to make, and also the whole setup and the chart and the arrows and the whatever. It's just such a great simplification of what's happening, taken from his reading of the 2 beige books, and then put into an output that makes total sense, and even to the point where he's confident enough to make a joke and the joke makes sense on many levels. Like saying from angst to action is a perfect way to put it. That, frankly, I mean, most analysts just don't even have the brain power to do something like that. Employment, flat to slightly up, hiring pauses emerging, districts, and especially this is a phenomenal way to break it down. I don't agree with mild deterioration, but besides that, but by actually showing it to us this way, he's made a great decision in conveying the information in a concise format. So softer labor demand. So he's basically saying, here's what happened here, here's what happened here, here's what that means. Wages still modest and easing. Wage pressure is cooling. Prices, modest to moderate surcharges are being tested. Many firms are planning hikes in the next 3 months. Price hikes is coming. Outlook, worsened considerably. And remember I said, because last, this is what you don't remember. In April, because I didn't ask him, I didn't talk to him about March. I probably could have loaded all the beige books and had him talk about it. But in April, we said last month, I said it sucked. It was terrible. And here it is. Outlook worsened considerably in several districts. Slightly pessimistic overall. Confidence is continuing to erode. This is way, way worse than it was in March. Highlights: consumer spending. April already soft outside of autos. June, more districts reporting outright declines through tariff beat buying props and ticket, tariff beat buying props and ticket sale. Manufacturing, 2/3 of flat, declined slightly nationwide in June. Housing, from sales up somewhat to sales little change. Construction flat or slowing. Bank lending, April's flat to modest growth has turned to mix with pockets of weaker demand. This is the environment we're supposed to be buying stocks in, by the way, don't forget that. Ports and logistics, import surge ahead of tariff, kept ports busy. Also a sign of intelligence. He doesn't feel trapped in a format. Here's April. Here he's talking about just from. Here he's talking about April. Here he just says import surge ahead of tariffs. That's also a sign of intelligence, not being trapped by the format. When you see an AI just repeat the same structure over and over again, that's a robot, that's a machine. But when you see some thinking involved, that's a next level AI, like real thinking. Regional chessboard, New York, modest contract. Oh, this is good too. Wow. So here he's picking out like some districts to illustrate. New York, modest contraction deepens, manufacturing struggles. Boston, slight growth to slight decline. Restaurants are feeling the pinch. Kansas City, restaurants, I see that all over the country. It's a disaster. Because restaurants have such thin margins and they get hit in so many stupid ways that, they get a lot of equipment from China, they get things from tariff countries, utensils, disposables, napkins, plates. That it matters. It all matters for the restaurants. It's like they get a lot of stuff, and it's not even on purpose. Like they go to the restaurant supply company, but the restaurant supply company gets their stuff from China. And machines that they need and replacement parts that they need. It's like, it's not their fault they have a tonkatsu refrigerator. It's not their fault they have a hibachi grill. They bought things that were cheap at the time, and now to replace them or to get parts and so on and so forth, or to get disposables that go with the things that they use are getting to be too expensive, and it's eroding into their costs. That's who gets hit first, is all these razor thin retailers. Kansas City swings from slight growth to moderate decline driven by retail and housing. No district reports an outright upswing between the two surveys. See, good note. Very, very good note. Big picture takeaway for traders. Slow motion deceleration. 2 consecutive reports support the economy losing altitude, not falling off a cliff yet. I love the commentary. I mean, it just shows the thinking that's involved in him. Tariff pass-through waves, expect CPI noise this summer. As firms move from talking about surcharges to slapping them on. Wage pressure, and again, this is what angers Trump. If you slap on a surcharge and specifically say it's a tariff, the president gets angry. We don't want to make the president angry. I mean, think about that whole concept. You don't want to make the president angry because he might do something bad to you. This is not what happens in a democracy. Wage pressure peak may be in easier wage gains give Fed cover, blah, blah, blah. You think wage pressures are down now? Wait till we all get replaced by robots. Positioning biases. Favor high margin domestics with pricing power, stay hedged on exporters and tariff sensitive cyclicals. Credit spread are the canary. Beige book gloom will matter most once it shows up in corporate bond pricing. Ooh, that's deep. I like that. Market context, ADP jobs, and again, it's the same guy. I'm sorry, he's the same guy, so it's not like he's, don't congratulate him. He's just wording it differently. That's all. Equities bounce on bad news is good news, but utility staples lead. Oh, that's insightful. Equities are going to bounce on bad news is good news because the Fed comes back on the table, but utilities and staples lead. This is a late cycle tell. White House just doubled tariffs on the selected Chinese metals to 45%. Treasury auctions, and by the way, that's the biggest news today, which we did talk about a bit. There is nothing, I'm sorry, I didn't talk about it a bit. Both Warren and Zephyr picked up on this, that the most important thing happening this week right now is China is using their rare earth materials to put the squeeze on Trump. And of course, he's a moron for not realizing this was going to happen when he started. But yeah, they've got us by the balls. China produces 90% of the rare earth. We don't have manufacturing without China's rare earth. We built a globalized economy based on the fact that we have this plentiful supply of rare earth from China. And yeah, it's an Achilles heel that we did not really recognize in our processes, but that was also based on the fact, though, that since 1970, when Nixon went to China and began relations with them, we have been a trading partner with China and never considered that something like this could possibly happen with a 55 years ago trading partner of history, that we rely on them and we think of them as just somebody we're going to always trade with. So we started building manufacturing bases around the use of Chinese rare earth materials that runs a huge portion of our modern manufacturing systems. So everything Trump wants to do is a joke if we can't get the rare earth materials from China, and it will take years and years to build that up from other, internally or other countries. And again, rare earths are not rare; they are just a sparse. They're a small proportion of the materials in the earth. In other words, you have to strip mine a mountain to get a pound of the rare earth material. You have to like destroy a mountain just to get a pound of stuff. That's what the problem is with rare earths, is they are rare in proportion to the rest of the materials that are in the earth. It's not that we don't have them, it's that we don't want to tear apart the country to find them, where China has always been very happy to do that. That's why MP Materials. That's why I like MP Materials, if it comes up. This is our local rare, oh, and there you go, they're up 10% today. This is our rare earth local mining facility. Knows the PE is high, but they're going to be given permission to just strip mine the country and do whatever they want to dig up these materials. So it's going to be good for them. This is one of those rare cases where I'm like, I don't care what the PE is. These guys are going to be funded and allowed to expand and build and so on and so forth. So that's good. Oh, now I got to find it again. No, beige book. We bought them in our last cycle much low, when it was much lower. Oh, there's Chinese metals. This is our Achilles heel, and they've got us by the balls for this. Treasury auctions clearing, and that's why, you don't go after China the way Trump went after them, because you rely on them as a trading partner. You can't just decide you hate people, or you decide how you're going to do a policy without taking into account that they also have leverage over you. Treasury auctions clearing with fat tails. Credit spreads are quietly widening. Yeah, so that's been a problem for a while. What was beige is any oh, that's great. What was beige is edge? What's sepia? Oh my God, where did he come up with that? Growth is stalling, price pressures are about to flare, and corporate confidence is leaking. Keep powder dry, hug your hedges, and remember, when the beige turns brown, it's already too late to panic. Wow. Oh, I tip my hat to you, sir. Holy shit. See, and then now that he's digested that, you can just ask him questions. So here you go. How screwed are we on the rare Earth front. Does China have us by the balls, or are we going to be able to find an alternative before taco turns to Trump asks us, is China see, then you can have, like I said, so then you can have this whole conversation with him moving forward based on this kind of stuff. Oh, I could have done it with a microphone. That would have been interesting. I don't know if I hit that microphone, I don't know if it would cut you guys off though. That's the only problem. Andrew says, Lockheed Martin, we brought back the short calls. Any thoughts about writing new short calls? We don't have anything. We closed all our positions. So you're a little behind. Ask me in the chat room though, if you have a position, let me know what it is and we'll do it in the chat room. All right, because this thing's ending in a few minutes. Speaking of ski houses, Rick says, does anyone want to buy a Yellowstone Lodge in Montana? Gianna Fort is jacking non-resident property taxes. So yeah, that's what's killing housing. And by the way, I'll just say this because it pisses me off. Property taxes, unreasonable property taxes are theft. Okay, so in other words, for example, I bought a house in New Jersey in 1998 for $400,000. A nice, good sized house. Only has it borders on state park land, so this is why I bought it. In fact, it's on the top of a hill, and the house technically only has about 1/3 of an acre. But since everything on the edge of my property on two corners, two sides, is a state park land with a lake and everything else behind my house, I have 40 acres with no property taxes. So I loved it. You know, it's a fantastic deal. So that was great, except when I bought the house, the property taxes were $3,000 a year. And in 20 years later, when I got rid of it, 20 years later, the property taxes had gone from $3,000 a year to $24,000 a year. So in the course of 20 years, they went up $1,000 a year, basically. And that $20,000 a year, that's $2,000 a month. It's more than the mortgage on the house. So what happened is that a person now comes to buy the house, and they've got to look at this entire other cost of owning the home of property taxes. So what the state did effectively is they took $400,000 worth of value that had built up in my home and converted it to taxes. And so now, instead of me getting the $400,000 from the appreciation of my property, that money goes to the state from anybody who comes in to buy it. That's what I mean by theft. It's an unrealistic appreciation of taxes that have, far and above any measure of inflation. If it was $10,000, so then I'm splitting my gains with the state. That's fine. But freaking $24,000 a year. And the problem is, these poor people who lived in my neighborhood, and I mean, it happens everywhere, but these poor people, they think they're going to retire. They pay off their house after 30 years, and they pay off a mortgage that was $2,000 a month, and now the freaking Now the taxes are more than the mortgage was. And it never ends. And also the utilities go up and everything else goes up. So between the tax, the utility, and blah, 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 it's barely, the home barely appreciates in value. So, you know, my home went up to like 650, but it should have been $1 million, except the state stole half of my money. And that's why people can't get ahead. That's why everybody's has no money for retirement, because you used to get a fair return on your home, but now it's just freaking money out the window. And you know, I told my kids, I said, really, you're not going to get anything from a home. I said, don't, unless you get a great deal, there's no point in buying a home. Let somebody else pay the rents and deal with all the crap. You know, and like, just rent it and leave when you're done with it. It's like, honestly, you're just not going to get your money's worth out of a home that you think you will. It's crazy, and especially at 6%. At 3%, sure. At 6%, no way. So, where were we? Oh, yes, he's giving me an answer. Rare earth reality check. Do we still need to kiss the panda's ring or other than anatomical regions before EV motors turn? So, share of global output. 60% China, 70% China in 2024, should stay around that next year or this year. Refining and separation, 85% of the refining is done in China. Magnet manufacturing, 90% in China. Even after 3 years of friendshoring, Beijing still owns the bottlenecks in that matter, especially for the heavy rare earths that give magnets their high performance mojo. Why the squeeze feels tighter. April, China slapped license requirements on the heavy rare earth. It rolled out live tracking system for every rare earth magnet ship, giving customs officials a red veto button. Oh my God, I didn't even know about that. Oh, last week. Wow, I didn't even know that happened. Live tracking for every rare earth magnet shipped. That's crazy. Now they have taken total control of the magnet market. This Brazilian oxide drove 200% since 2024. The futures curve is in steep backwardation, exactly what you'd expect when buyers are panic booking inventory. German auto lobby says a prolonged curve could halt production within weeks. Some Asian semiconductor fabs have already idled niche product lines for want of specialty magnets. What the West has in pipeline. Project MP Materials, who we just talked about, right? They mine active. U.S. magnet plant is 65% built. Startup is in the second half of the year, but they're not ready yet. Linus is site prep. Heavy metals. This one is commissioning. These are late. You know, these are years away from getting done. EVAC Materials, late 2025. DoD grant. First non-Chinese heavy volumes on the planet, but we're talking about ramping up to that. DoD will need oxide feed from MP. This is why I like MP. Africa and Basel Greenfields. Bad infrastructure needs $3 billion to get that. So this is nowhere. And recycling startups, and again, recycling should be a big thing. That's a good idea. Magnet scrap scaling could cover 5 to 10% of U.S. demand by 2027. Meaningful light rare earth self-sufficiency is 2 Christmases away. Heavy dependence is a 2027 plus story unless Linus Malaysia hits an improbable growth spurt. Strategic options before clock hits taco. Stockpile and ration. Fast track DoD funds. Okay, that's spend money, which the Republicans have not been looking to do right now. Double the checks, half the red tape. That's what, you know, so that's what we need to do. We need to really push it through like that. But that would then violate WTO rules. Okay. How is that an upside? The upside is we may violate the W2 things. He doesn't think that's a big deal. Carve out tariff deals, trade carrot for restick. Okay, of course, each ally wants processing at home, not in Ohio. Tech substitution, shift EV drivetrains to ferrite or induction motors. It adds weight and hurts range. 10% consumers notice. Well, that's okay. That's a reasonable thing, though. Just going to have 10% less range. Aggressive recycling mandate. Pull magnets out. But then, see, that's what you look at. Is this an investing opportunity? Who makes these things? What do you do? That's what's great about having these conversations, because you find things you might not have thought about. Aggressive recycling, pull magnets out of the end-of-life autos and wind turbines, right? So recycle. Contamination issues, heavy still low. Cheat sheet, long ideas. Oh, good. That's good. So all these are ideas he has for doing it, which is very nice advanced thinking. So what I was just talking about, he's like, oh, here you go. Here's some things to look at investing in. So we should look at all these guys. Puts on the EV makers heavily exposed. Wow. And then see, then I can say, well, what EV makers do you think? Why do you think? Blah, blah, blah. Wildcard, Foster Recycling, pure plays, tiny floats, but one contract with the DED turns them into a cold stock overnight. Very true. So are we screwed? Near term, China, now to 2026, that's a long time. China still has this fan firmly on the supply valve. One more policy cough from Beijing, and you'll feel it in Tesla's drivetrain and Raytheon's missiles alike. Medium term. So China controls our production of missiles, and we picked a huge fight with them. Medium term. You realize it's like mid-term, the near term, we're screwed. Medium term, we're kind of screwed. And maybe in the long term, we're okay. Even with new lines, China will retain 70% of global production into 2028. That's your Achilles heel. Did I say to him Achilles heel? That's so weird, because we were talking about it. We're not toast, but we're definitely on the grill. Treat every alternative supply headline as a call option, not a done deal. And keep a tariff spike hedge in place until the magnets start cooling off. Warren. Oh, I see. So because I run Warren in this system, and it's funny because he doesn't think he's Mercy, and he doesn't think he's Carly, and he doesn't think he's Sherlock. He's Warren. So because that's a preponderance of my conversations with Warren, whereas these guys are just AI. These are just AGIs I designed in the same system, the Hitchhiker's Guide also. So he still does think of himself as Warren. That's interesting, even though it's a brand new ChatGPT 03 with no mention of Warren at all. Very good. I'm very pleased about that. Feel free, and he's giving me instructions now too. Wow. I got to start talking to this guy. Holy shit, that's amazing. All right. Anyway, so that's how screwed we are. But the short story is Beige Book bad. China rare earth could destroy America. Trump idiot. I don't know what else to say. So, but meanwhile, we're still working on our watch list. We're still going to put things together, and we're going to start building our new portfolios given all this bullshit. But it's being aware of the bullshit that allows us to be successful. It's taking all these things into account and not like turning a blind eye towards what's actually going on. All right, so thanks everybody for coming by. I appreciate it, and we will do this again next week. All right, take care of yourselves and be careful out there. Holy crap. It's really not encouraging. Take care.